Ann Ross lives in Southern California, and she has a master's degree in social work and graduate level coursework in art history. She's been collecting she's been collecting postcards for about 10 years. And you may know her by her Facebook page about artist signed postcard, article in a picture postcard collecting, as well as presentation that she has in the past. I will not list them all. And she uses her background in art history and social work and social justice to interpret the artist signed postcard in a new light. So she began with the intention of teaching collectors to evaluate postcard using the principle of art history. But then, whenever she researched a postcard artist, scandalous detail about their life suddenly appear in a very strange way. And so these naughty bits were often new to the postcard community, and Anna felt that if the universe was
Hmm.
leading her in another direction, um, so she will figure it was better to follow. So we're looking to the Kaiser propaganda cards in the area where his personal life, mental health, and some spicy scandal intersects with just a tiny bit of history.
Well, you've heard a little bit about how I got to where I've gotten today. And the Kaiser, he entered the world at the Royal Palace in Berlin in 1859, and he had a rather difficult birth. He that left him with a paralyzed left arm. His mother was Vicky, the oldest daughter of Queen Victoria, and his father was Kaiser Friedrich III. And that's just about all the genealogy I'm going to bore you with. And he had many nicknames, and Mad Dog of Potsdam was one of many. And here he is, you see him on the right. He is copying a pose from a portrait of Napoleon. And this little sketch of the Mad Dog of Potsdam we'll talk about in a little bit. And my focus today is going to be on the more uncommon cards from France, Belgium, and a little bit of Italy, the artisan cards with a few photographic cards as well. And so I'm going to be doing the pro and anti-Kaiser propaganda as well as the pre-World War One and post-World War One. And the first propaganda that we come across is actually photographs. Here are some of the earliest photographic propaganda. And in the royal family, not only in Germany, but also England, there was the customary thing was that little princes must be perfect. They're royal, so they must be above everybody else. And the Kaiser, he was known as Willie when he was little. He actually had his birth was very traumatic, and the doctors had to use forceps. So he was left with nerve damage in his left arm. And you can see here this photo up in the upper left corner. This is Wilhelm, Willie, at age 12. And this is one of very few postcards where, I'm sorry, photographs or postcards where you can actually see both of his arms. So because little princes must be perfect, his disability was hidden, and they were very particular about that. So this is one of only maybe three that I've seen, and the other two are when he was an adult. When he was very small, his mother went through all these worry about he needs to be perfect, so we have to fix his arm. And you can see here this contraption on the upper left. His neck started to be pulled to one side, and he had to wear this for an hour a day. And the other treatments were pretty barbaric as well for a small child. So he was an angry child. He did not have a very good childhood. And later on, he was He was an average student. He and his disability left him kind of with an inferiority complex for his entire life, basically. And um, after university, he joined the cavalry, and that's where he found his place. He loved the cavalry. He joined the elite regiment called the Prussian Hussars, which was very, very prestigious regiment. His mother knew about his propensity for a big ego long before he was an adult. She wrote to him in a letter, "I fear you fancy yourself more perfect in many things than you really are." So we see him here. Here he is on the lower right. This is after he married. He married at age 22. He married his second cousin. And then that was in 1881. 7 years later, he became Kaiser at age 29. So he was very young to become an emperor. And our first propaganda cards that I found, this one on the left is from 1898 from the Kaiser's diplomatic trip to the Holy Land, which he made with his wife as well. Now this card is this is a detail of this card, and this particular set was 16 cards, and this card was the flagship of the whole grouping. The other cards were like Bruce-House, the typical souvenir cards of the Kaiser going to various different places in the Holy Land. Now, here in this card, yes, in this card in particular, is interesting because it shows the Kaiser. You see, he's on a white horse, and he always rode white horses in these public appearances where he wanted to be seen because a white horse stood out. And he's coming through the gate to Jerusalem. And this is the iconography, the study of the image, the meaning of the image is important because it brings to mind Jesus' entry through Jerusalem on a donkey. And this was deliberate on his part. He was very savvy about this sort of thing. And so it puts him kind of in the role of Jesus. And it says to his countrymen, I'm a religious person. Religion is important to me. The Holy Land is important to me. And the Kaiser really loved these postcards. He sent them to his friends. He sent them to dignitaries. He sent them to his daughter. And he was also known to send some pretty risque cards to his intimate friends. And these particular cards of his trip to the Holy Land, they actually made him a postcard collector, which is really interesting. And the one on the right, this one is actually a print. I haven't seen it made into a postcard, but I'm pretty sure it was. And I call this the happy family portrait, and it's showing we're all united. Look at my beautiful kids, and they're all well behaved, and they're all nice and clean. Well, everything at this time in 1898 was not as it seems, because at this time the Kaiser had mistresses, and he had a couple of illegitimate children. The next that we get into is the anti-Kaiser side of the pre-World War I propaganda. And these three cards are by the famous French caricaturist Orange Denizard. Here, what we see, these are pretty tame compared to what comes later. The Kaiser's mental health is now a theme, and all three of these cards come from 1902. And the first one on the left, you can see the Kaiser is in the role of Napoleon, the megalomaniac. At this time, he was giving speeches. He wanted to, turn all the world into Germany, basically. Every country needs to be like Germany. And this card mocks that megalomaniacal desire to conquer everything. And underneath, and it also mocks his love of uniforms. The Kaiser was pretty famous for, he had a bazillion uniforms and, changing into the different uniforms multiple times a day. It also mocks his love of being photographed. He loved posing, he loved being photographed, and he was known to actually figure out poses in front of a mirror. And this card is interesting because, like many of Oren's cards, it has a meaning underneath it. And to the French people, they were worried. This kind of expresses their fear that the Kaiser was going to become like Napoleon and conquer France. And that is exactly what he tried to do. Now, the next one in the middle, this one is interesting as well. And here's the Kaiser in the role of the medieval beggar slash itinerant musician. And this is an image basically from medieval art. So it's a very, very ancient imagery that Oren's has made use of here because everybody in France would understand it. And it mocks the Kaiser's authoritarian approach to ruling, to leadership. And so here's the Kaiser as the one-man band he's controlling all these different instruments, and he's attempting to basically, it's mocking his attempt to orchestrate everything. In Germany, he wanted to control everything and then extend that to other countries throughout Europe. So that's a really interesting card. And the one on the far right, this one is mocking the Kaiser's jealousy, the Kaiser's ambitions, and in particular, the Kaiser's jealousy of his cousin, King Edward VII, over in England, who had the biggest navy in the world. And the Kaiser he wanted a big navy too. But one of the really cool things about this card is that it's showing him as a child adult. And Wilhelm, there's a lot of contemporary accounts that mention he had this childish side to him. And you'll notice he has wearing a sailor suit like a child. It doesn't have any medals on it. And Wilhelm he loved wearing medals. And then he's wearing a captain's cap or an admiral's cap. So that's a subtle way of conveying this. He has this immaturity. And what's he doing? He's got a wash basin full of water and he's floating little toy boats in it, which again is making fun of his, wanting to have this huge navy and saying, well, he's too immature to be able to do this. Well, he did do quite well at building up the German navy. So the next cards that we're going to look at, the next artist signed cards, show the artists starting to get ideas from current events, scandals. So these are more pre-World War I cards, but they have to do with scandals. They're making fun of the Kaiser's involvement in certain scandals here. So you'll find that scandals fuel these are from 1905 and 1908, these cards. And they poke fun at the Kaiser's feminine side, which, back then they would label it as weak. And by extension, because the Kaiser represents Germany, it's also saying that, look, Germany is weak too. So this is what these artists are making fun of. And the two on the left are French. The black and white one is from Czechoslovakia. And now in the 1890s, there was a gigantic sex scandal in Germany that involved a few of the Kaiser's cabinet members, very prominent politicians who were closeted gay guys. And they were exposed, and the Kaiser, they were at a party, and the Kaiser fortunately left the party before it got very frisky and people ended up in an orgy. So as a result of this huge scandal, the Kaiser had a law passed in 1894 that if you criticize or ridicule Kaiser Wilhelm that you'll end up in jail. And this law was enforced very, very rigorously. And so this is why you don't see any of these cards that are mocking the Kaiser as if he were homosexual, and we don't really know whether he was or not. At this point, you don't see any of these cards in Germany because it was illegal and nobody wanted to be, the artist did not want to be put in jail. So the one on the left, I call it the drag queen. The Kaiser is here and he is in drag as a belly dancer, and the top of it says the belly dancer, a souvenir of a voyage to Morocco. And in 1905, the Kaiser he went on a diplomatic trip to Morocco, and his bumbling way of trying to do negotiations resulted in a diplomatic crisis. There was a journalist there present in Morocco who he kind of had some nefarious intent. He started linking the Morocco trip to the Kaiser's gay cabinet members. He had like a sort of like a shadow government, a cabal of his supporters. And now we move to the card with the pink background. And this one came from another scandal that the poor Kaiser got embroiled in 1908, and it's now called the Eulenburg Affair. And these two cards, the pink one and the black and white one, are they're direct results of this Eulenburg Affair. And the pink one is by, again, Orenz, and this one is dated 1908. And here, the Eulenburg scandal, what happened was that the Kaiser's best friend, Prince Eulenburg, he was a closeted gay guy, and he, a lot of people kind of suspected him, but back then you didn't talk about this stuff. It was taboo. So Prince Eulenburg throws a party for his best friend, the Kaiser. And again, there are these cabinet members, his bosom buddies are present that are, they're gay and they're in the closet. And part of the entertainment was one of the Kaiser's generals, who is a gay guy, he decides to dress in a ballerina's tutu, and he does a dance in front of the Kaiser and everybody present, and they're all laughing and having fun, and the general drops dead right in front of the Kaiser. He had a heart attack. There was a military cover-up, and the journalist who was in Morocco, he pops up again, and he gets hold of some letters to and from some of these people that were at this party, and he outs these guys that were closeted. He outs them in newspaper articles, and the result was that there were 5 trials, and they were civil trials. Only one of them was a criminal trial. So this was very, very cruel. The trials were horrible, but they did have a good side. One of the good things that came out of it was the first public discussion of homosexuality in Germany, because before it was taboo to even mention it anywhere. And now this card, the pink one, I call it the flirt. And the significance of this card is that here William is wearing his what's called I can never pronounce this, cuirassier. Clarissa, you can help me with the pronunciation. It's French. Cuirassier, a cuirass, the breastplate of this particular. Pardon me?
In cuirass.
Yes, yeah. And the military uniform involves this breastplate, and here you see the artist has kind of made it into a bustier, so it's very, very suggestive. And he's got the thigh-high boots on, and this I learned from reading some stuff about the trials. This particular military uniform was considered to be very provocative and very sexy by gay guys in Germany. And you'll see here that he has his sword and it's unsheathed, which is a phallic symbol. And, it's basically saying I'm ready for action. And I'm not sure what the significance of the spoon is. And the caption is, it's something about gay men and some type of powder, but it's slang. So I don't really know exactly how to interpret it. So anyway, let's go on to the next one. The black and white one, I call this one the seducer. And here you see the Kaiser is sitting on the crescent moon with his lover, Carl. And the caption in Czech, I ran it through a translator, and it says roughly, "Don't get angry, Carl," and it uses a diminutive term like Carlito, little Carl, darling Carl. Don't think it turned out so badly. And what he's talking about is the Eulenburg affair, the scandal. We'll go get lost somewhere else if no one likes us down there on Earth. And again, the journalist wrote an article that linked the Kaiser to a man named Karl Kistler, who was the secretary and masseur to the Kaiser's buddy, Prince Eulenburg. And so, this journalist is outing people and all of these, trials. It was just terrible. But this particular card strikes me as being sad and lonely. They're not, they don't fit in on Earth, and it's like they've been ostracized, outside of Earth, out in space. Gay men don't belong, which is, I think, one of the messages that this card is sending. Now, we don't really know, was the Kaiser gay? Was he bi? Was his wife a beard? In other words, he hid behind her to maintain a gay lifestyle. Well, he had, as I said, illegitimate children, etc. So I'm leaning towards the bi, but we don't know. And now the photograph on the far right, the dandy, this is Kaiser Wilhelm way back in 1897, dressed for a costume ball. And he's dressed and he took this costume from a painting of one of his ancestors that lived in the 1700s. And that particular ancestor, there was enormous speculation in, among literary people and whatnot. Was this particular ruler, was he gay? And so I found that kind of interesting as well. So we don't know. Now, the consensus among historians is that he was a repressed homosexual. That's where they chose to stand at this point. And now we're going to move into the World War I, the pro-Kaiser propaganda. And this one, here's the theme of the Kaiser as the brave military leader. And this is an example of a really fake propaganda card, because this is, it's really pretty. The colors are pretty and whatnot, but the Kaiser never served in battle. He never led a cavalry troop. And part of that was because, one, he's the heir. He was, when he was the crown prince, he was the heir to the throne. He also, when he was Kaiser, he didn't appear in battle on a horse because he's going to have trouble. He'll be very vulnerable if he's holding, like he is here, a sword in one hand and he's got the reins in the other. So he's very, very vulnerable. So I think that's one of the reasons why he didn't appear in battle. And, of course, the artist had a field day with this, saying that he was a coward, which we'll look at in a little bit. So the only thing in this postcard that is actually factual, is, as we saw earlier, was he's riding a gray horse. So that's and it's also a very poorly drawn postcard. That's the other thing about it. So here's another theme: the Kaiser as a father figure. the Kaiser was beloved by children. And there are contemporary accounts that describe children and also women, because when he was younger, the Kaiser was extremely good looking. He could be charming. He knew how to interact with kids and tell them little stories and make them laugh. This card, I don't think this was staged. This is in northern Germany by the ocean. I think this was a real, actual, photograph. And the Kaiser was also known to be very, very media savvy. He knew how to use the media, whether it's, articles in the newspaper, whether it's photographs that he sent to the newspaper, whether it's postcards. He knew how to use it to mold his public image. He was the most photographed person of his day. He was also one of the earliest people to be followed by what we call now the paparazzi. He very tightly controlled how he was portrayed in the media. And now here's some more pro-Kaiser propaganda, and this is more religious in nature, and it also draws on some ancient myths and legends. And the Kaiser was raised with this doctrine that's very ancient in Germany, that Prussia's rulers were anointed, or as, if you will, ordained by God. They were basically God's representative on earth, so they could do no wrong. So one of his other nicknames was God's supreme warlord. These themes on the religious postcards, they draw on also German myths and legends. And the one on the left here shows the Kaiser as the leader. Here he is as the leader, but he's also chosen by God as the head of a divinely protected army. And what you see here, is the God's light shining down on the Kaiser and his troops from heaven. And the troops in the background, they're kneeling. And what's going on here is the Kaiser and his soldiers, they're praying before battle, God protect us, etc., etc. Yes. And then the card in the middle is by that same artist. And this one draws on, I think, ancient Germanic mythology. I think there's a Germanic is probably the god of war in the background, shielding the Kaiser with his shield, protecting him. So he's got, the protection not only of the Christian God, but also these ancient pagan ones as well. And here the Kaiser is giving an Iron Cross medal to a wounded soldier. And we'll hear more about that in a bit. Then the card on the right, of course, is the Kaiser in the role of I guess it's Saint Michael. You can also kind of think it's like Saint George minus the horse, the Christian warrior saint in the armor, and he is in the act of beheading the dragon, or as here, the multi-headed Hydra, which is, from Greek mythology. And then we go on to the anti-Kaiser propaganda here. And here's a French card. This one is from my collection. French propaganda was often the Kaiser must be punished, he must be stopped. And you'll also see that theme in American cards, British cards as well. So here what's happening is that he's being burnt in effigy, and they're whacking him with brooms, which is some kind of symbol of derision, which I haven't entirely figured out. And there are other French cards to show him being hung from the gallows and left for the crows. So we're kind of gradually getting more graphic and kind of more crude or cruel. And here are some Belgian cards, and they show another popular theme, the Kaiser as coward. The French and Belgian cards are sometimes hard to tell apart because they don't have a lot on the back, and they're obviously both in French. Here, the one on the left, if you're familiar with A Little Pissing Boy, the famous statue in Brussels, he basically is the embodiment of the Belgian people. And here he is, he's pissing on the Kaiser, and it's basically, I piss on you, scram, get out of here. And the Kaiser was a little bit, I'm going to use the word OCD, and he was very clean, and he's like shrinking, and he's going to flee. He doesn't want to be pissed on. So it's like he's very easily scared out of Belgium. And then the card on the right is another Belgian card with the Kaiser as coward, and he's so scared he can't even face the battle that's going on behind him, and his knees are knocking together in fear, and he's like, la 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 la, I don't want to hear what's going on. So this is portraying the Kaiser and the German army as stupid and broke. And how we see that is in the background, or in the middle ground, there's a German soldier on his knees. Well, he doesn't have a proper cannon. What is that he's triggering? It's a giant enema syringe, and it's squirting water on the mayor of Liege. So this is like it's also conveying the idea that the German army is going broke. It can't afford a proper cannon. And the mayor of Liege is like not concerned. He's like, these guys are not anything to worry about. And now I think you're wondering about, where did that mad dog of Potsdam come in? Well, here he is right here. This nickname for the Kaiser didn't come from Germany. It was from the Allies. It wasn't really used in Germany, obviously, because of that law. You didn't want to get caught talking schmack about the Kaiser in public, or you'd get stuck in jail. I'm not sure who used that term first. However, one of the things that popularized the term is this illustration on the left, which is not a postcard. It's the cover of a book, The Mad Dog of Potsdam, which was written by a British guy. It's basically the journey of a dog that gets rabies. And it's at one level, the kids interpret it at one level, and at another level, the adults interpret it. And you can see here the Kaiser as a dachshund. He's died of rabies. The Russian Cossack and John Bull, the embodiment of England, are carrying him off to his funeral. And here's a bunch of little French poodles, and they're happy that the Kaiser is dead, and they're dancing and whatnot. And this book, which I think I'm not sure whether it was published in 1914 and reissued in 1918, but no matter when it was issued, it sparked some postcards, and here is one of them. This is a British card on the right. Is basically different soldiers representing different allies, like the French soldier, and they're chasing the Kaiser. And here he's not a purebred dachshund. Now he's a mutt. They're chasing him out of France to go back to Germany, bugger off, so to speak. The next theme that we get into is the Kaiser as monster. And now we're starting to get into some more, little by little, some more gross cards. And these cards with the Kaiser as monster, they reflect his descent from mental instability, which was showing in the 1890s, to during the World War I, he was moving towards, or actually in, the severe mental illness. And here on the right is a French card, the Kaiser as gargoyle. So basically what this card is saying is that in return for all the destruction of our beautiful French cathedrals and your sins in doing so, you're going to get turned into stone. So here's a stone gargoyle, and all he can do now is spout water. He can't tell any more hateful lies. He can't make any more impulsive remarks that cause diplomatic crises. So this is a pretty clever card. And the contemporary accounts beginning in the 1890s start to mention, like, there's some upstairs downstairs type account books written. They start to mention his mental instability. By World War I, the psychoanalysts, the followers of Freud, actually they wrote a couple little articles. There was, I think, 2 in private professional journals that the public would not see. So they called him a pathological degenerate with a victim complex. And the one thing that you need to realize is, at this time in history, the word degenerate was basically code for gay. So that's what they're saying. And then the psychoanalysts, they also recognize his megalomania, his symptoms of what we call now bipolar disorder, that used to be manic depressive disorder. and they recognize his narcissistic behavior, although they don't use the word narcissistic. He was also abusive. There are accounts of him being like he's manipulative. He likes to see people. He likes to humiliate people and he manipulates them into situations where they're humiliated in front of a lot of other people. And his impulsiveness, his inability to kind of think before he talks, it got him into all kinds of scrapes, which unfortunately I don't have a lot of time to talk about, but his life is very interesting. Some of the contemporary accounts, but also the analysts, they figure out the Kaiser's darkest secret. And the thing that the Kaiser wanted to hide the most from his public was that he had nervous breakdowns. What happened was they were triggered whenever he made these mistakes, these gaffes when he didn't think before he talked. And those mistakes that he made exposes his incompetence to foreign leaders, and it gets in the press. And when that happens, he would self-isolate. He'd just go downhill, self-isolate in his bedroom for weeks or months sometimes. The people that worked in the royal household would describe him. He would go moaning and he would cry uncontrollably and be pacing about, talking about how he's complaining that he's a victim and he's been victimized by this person and that person, this country and that person. And he does this pacing back and forth. He gets exhausted and he collapses in bed and he just, goes to sleep. And he, in a few weeks or months, he recovers and he's back to his jolly self. He did in his memoirs later in life mention this. He admitted that he had these nervous breakdowns, but he said, "Oh, I just went to sleep and in the morning I was fine," which is not at all the case. Now, the result of all of this was that during World War I, the military pretty much seized control of everything that was going on, and the Kaiser became a figurehead, a PR tool. He was driven around and he would give speeches to the soldiers and give out medals. Again, we're seeing the negative World War I anti-Kaiser propaganda, and it's getting crueler and crueler. And here it is dealing with the German atrocities. I'm sure everybody probably remembers, hearing about that. The card on the right is an American card, and the Kaiser here is in league with Satan, and they're gloating over, the number of babies and children killed and that sort of thing. And then the card on the left is, again, it's harking back to the Kaiser being suspected of being gay, and here he is, he's making out with the devil. So they're more than just friends in that picture, in that postcard. The next one is the worst one of all. And here we go with the propaganda that the Kaiser and the German troops as a whole, they killed babies and they ate babies and things like that. These two cards reflect that. These are Italian cards, and the set is called Danse Macabre, and it was published in 1914. The artist is Alberto Martini, and this set of cards was specifically intended to be distributed to Italy's allies. The card on the right, here's the Kaiser. Now, this is not the devil, this is the specter of death, and the Kaiser is playing chess. He's basically gambling with the specter of death, and he's sitting on a bunch of skeletons, and this is all the propaganda of what the Germans have done to, in particular, the Belgian people. The card on the left is, again, the specter of death, and here he's got the British flag on his shroud, and he's confronting the Kaiser and, saying, if you don't, do what we want, if you don't come along, we're going to stick you in chains, or no, we want to stick you in chains. We want to, haul you off and put you in prison. And here's the Kaiser. He's so scared. He's got these claws, fingers like claws, And when you look at it, what's he got on his fork but a little fetus? And this was again the Kaiser's not only killing babies but eating them. And he's got little fetuses on his plate and little baby hearts. And I don't know who that man's head is. It's some, I think, political enemy. Now this set is very scarce and very valuable in the United States. I've seen these cards for about 125, $150. The grossest one of all, I couldn't really bring myself to put up here. So these do. And I wondered as I did this, why don't we see more of these horrible, nasty cards? And of course, the one thing is the German law that the Kaiser passed, no ridiculing me. But the other one was the obscenity laws in the United States, a Comstock law, that it was illegal to mail anything that was obscene. And they had that very, very broad definition of obscene. So England and the United States, they often used, and I'm sure everybody's probably familiar with these cards. They're so common that I didn't put any of them in here, where they used comic cards of children in the place of Germans or the Kaiser, and they, in that way, infantilize the Kaiser and they dehumanize him. It's making the enemy less scary. And while I was researching this, I came across some interesting stuff on newspapers.com. And one thing was a newspaper article from December 1914, where it talks about the UK and the French, their military censorship departments got together and they made this proposal, this policy to discourage families or relatives from sending anti-Kaiser cards to their loved ones at the front, because if they were taken prisoner and the Germans found the anti-Kaiser cards like in their pocket or something, that the Germans would kill the soldiers. And this actually apparently did happen. One or two of them were killed. A number of them were tortured. So they had good cause to be cautious about that. Next, we're going to go back to the positive side of things. And here's some, I like these cards in particular. These are by the artist Carl Schmidt. These are showing the truth in propaganda, that the Kaiser, he was not all bad. He's so often portrayed as evil and whatnot. And these cards have a grain of truth in them, although they are obviously romanticized. The first one on the left in English is the Kaiser's thanks. He's going down the rows of soldiers and pinning the Iron Cross medal on them. The one in the middle is really interesting because it has a dual meaning. The soldier, the wounded soldier here who was on the stretcher, he might see this, the translation of the caption, "Your father says you're worthy," is, oh, my father at home still thinks I'm okay, I'm worthy, even though I was wounded as a soldier. And another way that this card can be interpreted is that you notice that the soldier is looking up at the Kaiser. And what I mentioned before about the Kaiser being a father figure to children, well, he was also a father figure to many of the German soldiers, because the German soldiers, they loved him and they worshiped him. So they saw him as a father figure, and that's another way to interpret this. The other meaning that we see here is that what it's conveying is that the Kaiser cares about you, and he cares so much about you that he's coming to see if you're okay, coming to take care of you when you are being taken right off the battlefield. And you can see in the background there's an ambulance. So these medics are taking him right to the ambulance, and here's the Kaiser already. And that's the part that's, romanticized. The Kaiser did not often go up to the front. He was not really willing to do that. So that was another part of the cowardice bit. Card on the far right, a hero's award, shows the Kaiser, he's giving wreaths and flowers. He's putting them on the graves of soldiers that have died in combat. This he really did, just like the, giving the soldiers medals. He really did these things. So, he wasn't all bad. He did have compassion. He cared very deeply for his soldiers and their suffering and their sacrifice. So now we're going to see the flip side of all this medal giving here. And here are two anti-Kaiser cards, and how the Allies mocked his medal ceremonies that he had. And they really didn't understand what was going on. The Kaiser intended the Iron Cross to be given to soldiers of any rank, even the volunteers, the enlisted men, for their acts of bravery and acts of honor, being an honorable soldier. So, most of the soldiers of the upper ranks, the officers, they were like nobles, aristocrats, very wealthy men, whereas the enlisted men were, the hoi polloi. The Kaiser intended this medal program to be a social leveler, an egalitarian gesture. So because they awarded these medals to any soldiers that were, distinguished, their actions were distinguished, to any soldier in any rank, they had to make tons of them. So they actually awarded over 5 million of these medals. And this is where the Allies started ridiculing them. Well, if you awarded so many of these medals, they must not be worth anything. You're just giving them out to anybody indiscriminately, which wasn't really true. So mocking the Iron Cross was part of a coordinated propaganda program among the Allies, and to rally public support to ridicule the Kaiser, to make him look weak and stupid, as you see here. Now, here on the right, the Kaiser is in the role of a beggar, and he's selling the Iron Cross for a penny apiece. This is another old image from as far back as the 1700s in France and England, when the poor women and sometimes men would go out in the streets, and they would have these trays, and they would sell flowers or oranges or little stuffed animals to be able to make ends meet. So he's really being put in the role, and it's also by extension saying that the German army is impoverished as well. And here's the poor ratty old Prussian eagle at his feet, begging for coins. Then the other card here on the right is getting even more crude. And here we have the Kaiser. He's not that purebred dachshund anymore. He's a mutt, and he's like part dachshund and part basset hound or something. And he's rather slow and dim-witted. And what's he doing? He's putting the Iron Cross on the butt of the dog in front of him instead of on its chest. So it's very much ridiculing the Kaiser as, being dopey and not smart. I also found some interesting things online about this as well, this issue with the medals. In 1914, I found an article. The Allied countries actually made fake Iron Crosses, and they sold them as fundraisers to raise funds for the war effort and the relief effort for Belgian refugees, which I thought was kind of a flip side of this British card here. And now we're going to get to the end of the war. The end of the war now. We've reached the end and the aftermath. And here are the two cards. And the themes are, of course, the loser. He's lost the war. He's lonely. He doesn't know what to do. And the card on the right is a French card, and he's all dejected, depressed, and his broken sword is an ancient symbol of losing the war. He's lost. He's lost the battle. And the one on the left here was a Bamforth card published both in the United States and in France. In England and France. And it's like, nobody loves me. What do I do now? It's interesting. This one, he's got a uniform on, and the other one is like, what uniform do I wear now? I'm not the Kaiser anymore. What do I do? So his abdication was a condition demanded by the Allies as part of the armistice. They demanded that he abdicate. The Kaiser thought about this, and he knew that in Germany at this time there was a lot of unrest The people were tired of, they were, you know, starving. They had, you know, their homes bombed and destroyed, their family members killed, and there was a lot of strikes going on, and there was a revolution was threatening. There was all this unrest, and the Kaiser chose to abdicate to prevent a revolution. Now, then the Kaiser thought, well, what do I do now? He sought asylum in the Netherlands, which was, he knew it had always been a neutral country. And so he was awarded asylum. He and his wife move there, and they buy a palace, and they have 9 train loads of their belongings moved from 2 of their German palaces to this little palace, which is called Doorn in the Netherlands. His wife dies in 1921, and the next year he remarries a woman who's like 30 years younger than he. The interesting thing is that he was never indicted for his war crimes, and he was never prosecuted because the Netherlands refused to extradite him. And their concern was, could they really, you know, could a mentally ill emperor, a ruler, could a mentally ill emperor be really held responsible for World War I? And the other thing that they were concerned about was that declaring what they would call an exiled emperor a lunatic, that could be used to promote a political agenda. So he stayed in the Netherlands until his death in 1941 at age 82. His final years were also very interesting. He never really, for a good long time, gave up the idea of the monarchy being restored. He wants his crown back. He wants to be emperor again. You know, he wants to go back to the good old days. So in 1933, he sends off some representatives because he was forbidden to leave from, I think it was 5 or 10 kilometers around the palace. He couldn't go out of there. These representatives go to Hitler, and they try and negotiate, you know, restoring the monarchy. Well, the negotiations fail because Hitler was just as big a narcissist as the Kaiser, and he didn't want somebody else sharing his limelight. And the Kaiser was very canny. He expected trouble from Hitler after his death, so he wrote some things in his will to hopefully prevent any monkey business. And the first thing he wrote in there, he wanted a simple funeral, no state funeral, no swastikas, no goose stepping. And he also put in there that he did not want to be buried in Germany unless the monarchy was restored. So his wife built a mausoleum on the grounds of that palace in the Netherlands, and that is where his casket is. He's not buried in the ground. He's still in this mausoleum, and you can look in the windows and see his, you know, flag draped casket that's still in there. Now, after he died, Hitler, of course, goes to the Kaiser's wife, his second wife, and obviously she's not an empress because the Kaiser wasn't, you know, he had to abdicate. He goes to her and he says, "Oh, I want to give your wonderful husband this beautiful state funeral in Berlin." And she would not have anything to do with it. She refused. So what's really interesting about these dynamics that went on after his death is that the Kaiser's, his resistance to, you know, all the stuff that he put in his will, resisting whatever the Hitler might do to link so many years of imperial greatness in, you know, one Kaiser after another, he wanted to link it to his own regime, the Nazis. And the Kaiser wanted to prevent that. This whole thing became a symbol of resistance, his funeral, the way his wife and he reacted. It became a symbol of resistance to the Germans who did not like the Nazis. And after World War I, the Netherlands seized the palace, and they wanted to keep it out of the hands of the Kaiser's son, the Crown Prince, who was a Nazi sympathizer. So the Kaiser dies, and this photograph on the bottom left shows the Kaiser a year before he died with his German Shepherd the Kaiser loved dogs. That was one of his good points. He loved dogs, he loved horses. The Nazis up at the top, here's his casket coming out of the palace, and the Nazis are leading it. But none of them have, the armband with the Nazi symbol, the swastika on it. They don't have anything like that on. So they're respecting his wishes. But if you see down at the bottom right-hand corner, there's an enormous wreath that Hitler sent to his, to be displayed at his funeral with his casket. It's so big, it takes 4 men to carry it. And in the middle of it is a banner that's Adolf Hitler, and there's a couple swastikas. So he did manage to get a little bit in there. The Kaiser, he was very clever, as has, even at this advanced age, to evade what he knew that Hitler would do, and he was right. After his death, there were some good things. He left a legacy. It wasn't only, the cruelty and whatnot. He also left some good things. His home became a museum. And as you see here on the right, there's a lot of his uniforms still there. And it was a research center. There's a library and whatnot for scholars. The other thing that he was successful at was making Germany a superpower in Europe. He actually snitched these ideas from some of the socialists. He introduced a lot of social programs like worker protections. He had compassion for the workers in, their difficulties. Then he also was interested in technology and science, and he supported a lot of new efforts and new, inventions, developments, so that medicine became top tier in England. In Europe was German medicine. The next time that you either drive a German car or you use a German vacuum cleaner or a German kitchen appliance, you're actually benefiting from the Kaisers promoting the German engineering and technology. And that's where that phrase about the German engineering precision comes from. It comes from the Kaiser. So he wasn't all bad. By now, I guess maybe you're wondering where I got all this information from. And I've got a slide of the references that I used. And I used a combination of the modern references. Biggest authority on the Kaiser's life now is a man named John Rule. And he wrote a 3-volume biography of the Kaiser and some other works. And then I also used, two. One is a biography of the Kaiser's mother. The other one is the letters. This is a book that's pretty well known. Dearest Mama, Letters Between Queen Victoria and the Kaiser's Mother. And I used that to learn about his childhood. Unfortunately, I couldn't cover that. We had to focus on his postcards. So if you want to learn more, here's some of the good sources. And then I also used some kind of upstairs, downstairs, gossipy scandal books that were published, like they couldn't be published in Germany, but so they were published in the United States or England. And the private lives of the consort of the Kaiser and his consort, the secret life of the Kaiser, which actually is a very interesting reading. Then I also used the memoirs of the Kaiser, the memoirs of the Kaiser's son, the Crown Prince, which actually were very boring and pretty self-serving, and I didn't get a heck of a lot of stuff out of them. And the last one of his contemporaries that I used, there's 2 other ones. There's a Memoirs of the Kaiser's Court by the woman who was the English teacher to the Kaiser's children. So that was really interesting to read as well. And then there is a biography of the infamous Prince Eulenburg from that scandal. So this gave me a fairly balanced view, combining all these sources. So now I've come to the end of my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed listening as well as much as I enjoyed giving it. And does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Ann. It was interesting, very interesting program, and thank you. I love the variety of cards.
Yeah.
I collect a little bit of it myself, and most of them I've never seen. So
That was my intention. I didn't want to use, this is a fairly long presentation, so I wanted to make it interesting and use
Sure. Sure.
these cards that are not only less often seen, but they're also more valuable.
Right. Well, good job and thank you.
It was fascinating, especially the latter part of his life. And I know that after the war, Prussia was done away with. I guess it's part of Poland now
Yes,
because of
okay.
the
Hmm.
militarism
Yeah.
that was produced by that part of Germany.
Hmm.
The Allies had it after 2 wars.
Hmm.
How many Iron Crosses did you say were awarded?
5 million.
5 million.
Yes.
And Hitler got one of them. He did. He got one of them. He had an
Oh,
Iron-
really?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
And
because he
and
did. He fought in World War I, didn't he? Yes, yes.
yeah.
he did.
And you
Interesting.
said, and there were counterfeit Iron Crosses?
Oh, I wouldn't use the word
No.
counterfeit. Maybe I shouldn't have used the word fake. They were like reproductions. They were like
Repro-
cheap imitations. Yeah, for that the Allies used to, raise money, which is
Okay.
it's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
To raise money for the war effort.
Okay. Fascinating. Because you see a lot of postcards of German aviators and soldiers, and of course, it's a big deal that they have an Iron Cross.
Yes, yeah, it
I'm
was like
saying that
this matter
everyone
of
got one.
honor and pride. So
Yeah.
in Germany, it was interpreted entirely different. And the Allies, because they weren't in Germany,
Yeah.
they didn't know, and they just used it to, make fun of Germany and the Kaiser and the soldiers too.
Okay. Well, it was a great presentation.
Thank you,
Mm.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you
It
so much.
really,
And
it really
Great
was. It
postcard.
was wonderful.
And-
Thank you.
All right, Max.
Yeah, thank you. And how big is the universe of these Kaiser cards? Is
Oh
there,
gosh,
you know,
there's
hundreds or
lots.
thousands, or and
You know,
how
I
is it
don't.
also how was it split between pro versus anti?
Oh, I don't know how many of them there are. I mean, there's stuff about I don't know, 15,000 photographs of them, but I haven't seen anything about how many propaganda cards are that there's tons of them. Or let's put it this way, there were tons of them, and obviously, some of them have been thrown out and whatnot. But you can find, like I looked on WorthPoint, not all of those cards in that presentation were mine. Some of them I got off of WorthPoint. I got some of them off of Wikimedia Commons, but there's all kinds of, cards. But I think, when I first started this and I got interested in propaganda, about 2 years ago when I bought a big box of French artist signed cards from a dealer at which show? I can't remember, probably Wichita. And almost all of the cards were like propaganda, French propaganda. There was some German propaganda. I thought of propaganda as just war related, but it's not. It was my idea, and probably other people have done this too, to divide it into pre-World War I propaganda and post World War, and then the armistice type propaganda. I'm sure I'm not the only one that did that. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but yeah, it was quite difficult to pick, which card should I, and oh my goodness, I changed the cards, I don't know how many times, which should I leave out? And when I first started this, the presentation was an hour long. So I had to eliminate quite a bit. And the Kaiser's life, if anybody he had such an interesting life, and his childhood was fascinating, but I didn't have time to get into all of it. So that's why I wanted to put the
There will be
references.
another presentation, I suppose.
Well,
Thank you.
I've learned that in my presentations that I do, there's usually a spin-off of them, and there's a sort of spin-off of this. I'm going to be doing a presentation on Oren's Denizard. Michael, where are you? Where's Michael Block? I think it's January, right, for the Western New York Postcard Club. Is that right? January, I
I
think.
got to look it up and see, but
So that's a spin-off. The other spin-off, I thought, well, the Crown Prince of Prussia, Wilhelm's eldest son, he was interesting too. He got into all kinds of scrapes. He was when I started this, I thought it was just, oh, here's the Kaiser and his atrocities. And I had absolutely no idea about these scandals where, there was people that thought he was gay. I had no idea of that at all.
Mm.
So that was a total surprise.
And
Very, very interesting, which kind of led off of my other, the other presentation that I did of Hugo Tuck.
And how many Alberto Martini cards do you have?
I don't have any myself because they're kind of out of my budget. I've actually never seen any. So those I got off of, where did I get those from? Probably WorthPoint or Wikimedia Commons. I never have seen. Clarissa, do you know how many?
I don't know how many there are, and I tried to find my set because I think I have it, because my grandfather legacy, so I didn't buy them.
Yeah.
I have to check and maybe get back to you, but I couldn't find them of immediately like this. I had
Yeah.
to look for them.
I've seen maybe, I'm thinking 10, but there could be more that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll let you know once I find them.
The other thing that I really wanted to put in here, but I didn't because I wanted to, just focus on postcards. There are also some very graphic prints that were, oh gosh, what is the guy's name? He's British, and there's a book of his prints, and it's called the Kaiser's Garland, and you can find it. Where I found all these out of print books was two places. Online, the HathiTrust Digital Library and the Internet Archive. And on those two websites, you can read and download books that were published way back in like the 1600s. So I've got a lot of these books off of there.
And what did maybe you mentioned this a little bit, but I'm wondering what like it seems like from our side, the propaganda cards were really focused on him and his physical appearance and everything. Like he was very much a lightning rod, I guess, for
Yes.
represented Germany. So when the German cards, which I'm not too familiar with, what did they, with respect to England, did they focus on King George, or was it just different? Did they have the same sort of things in
the
their
German
cards?
World War I
Yeah,
propaganda.
did they have
You
something
know,
corresponding, or do you know?
I haven't seen a lot of it, and the artists, most of what I've seen is the pro Kaiser stuff. They were so, the whole country just about, loved the Kaiser. So I think they were extremely careful of what they did. And France was the basically the king of the propaganda. They did, the propaganda making fun of the Kaiser, propaganda making fun of, King Edward, King George. Everybody was fair game. And I think part of the difference is the laws in France must have been a lot laxer than the laws in Germany. And I know in England, there were some laws, I think, against, let's see, making derogatory images of Queen Victoria. So I don't know as much. I can't give you a really good answer on that because I was so focused on this narrow thing, but I haven't seen, and you just enter in WorthPoint, you just enter Kaiser 1 and, Kaiser 2 and postcards, and you would assume that if they did other negative cards about England, that they would be in there. And I really don't remember seeing very many. I think there's some, come to think of it, German submarines blowing up British ships, that sort of thing, but is a very tame compared to the, particularly those Italian. British artist, his name was Sullivan, that did the Kaiser's Garland book. Very, very graphic cards, and some of them influenced, now I'm skipping a couple, 100 years. Some of them influenced those posters from the 60s of the Grateful Dead with the skull and whatnot. So those cards those prints were, as far as I know, they were never made into postcards, and those were even grosser or as gross as those Italian cards by Martini, the Martini cards. So unfortunately, I didn't have the time to put those in there because I wanted to focus on the postcards. And then there's also, I found some magazine covers. There was a magazine called Cartoons, and it basically was an American publication that kind of weeded, they snitched cartoons and caricatures from like Punch and whatnot in France and Italy, and they put them in this American magazine called Cartoons, and that's an interesting source as well. But again, I have to focus on the postcards.
And I would like to thank you very much for a very interesting presentation.